Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Psychocinematic. Today we'll be covering M3GAN, directed by Gerard Johnstone, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And as always, spoilers ahead. So I initially didn't want to see this movie. I honestly thought it looked dumb, but I started seeing all the good reviews that it was getting, so I said, what the hell? And with names like Jason Blum and James Wan in the producer credits, I thought, it's gotta be good. Most of their work is pretty good. But while we're on the subject of James Wan, I think someone should probably check on him because his obsession with dolls and his ability to capitalize on it for horror movies is pretty outstanding. He's directed films like Saw and Dead Silence while being a producer on a movie like this, M3GAN, and Annabelle. So yeah, I think he's got a little bit of a thing for dolls. So anyways, I never go into a movie hoping that it's bad. So with that, I was rooting for M3GAN. So I saw this movie on opening night with my family, and after the film was over, my stepdad said something that I thought was pretty accurate. And he said, it's like Chucky, but better. And I think this film does a really good job at giving you that classic slasher feel without it being corny. And what I mean by that is not necessarily the scare factor of a slasher, but it has plenty of comedic relief without cheapening the movie or taking away from the horror. And M3GAN feels like a classic slasher antagonist because she's insanely powerful and basically unkillable. M3GAN has clear commentary on the state of parenting today with iPad kids, as well as the radical advancements of AI. Where this film does exceedingly well at is never letting that commentary feel like an agenda that gets put before the movie itself and the horror that we're all supposed to be enjoying. That happens almost more often than not nowadays in Hollywood, for example, the latest rendition of Candyman. So I did enjoy this movie, but I really don't see myself watching it anytime soon in the future, but I do think that this is a perfect film for the families with teenagers or, preteens that are looking for a good, scary movie that isn't rated R and it's not overly scary to the point you got to worry about your kids asking to sleep in bed with you. I don't think many teenagers do that, but the younger kids. This movie does have a few jump scares that are really just startling and not actually scary, but if you suffer from, I don't even know if this is an actual word, but I found it online, automatonophobia, which is where you're afraid of humanoid shapes like mannequins, wax figures, robots, etc., then I think you will be more long-term creeped out by this movie because the uncanny valley is insane. I watched a little bit of the behind the scenes on how they made M3GAN look the way she did, and it's pretty impressive because, they just have a little girl actress and they put this silicone mask around her and some gloves on, and then they have someone else voice her over. It's pretty impressive. Looks like it's mostly all done practically. Think with things like the eyes, they probably use CGI for, the pupils dilating and so on. So as of today, Rotten Tomatoes, the critics have given it 95% and the audience have given it 78%. And where I stand, I'm a 7 out of 10, so 70%. I really don't think that 95% Rotten Tomatoes is warranted. I kind of think that this movie is getting a hall pass in a sense that people went into it not expecting much, and when they saw that it was actually better than it looked, people were like, oh my God, this is amazing. But I felt like this movie is pretty much just face value. What you see is what you get. There wasn't a lot for me to dig into. But with that being said, I'm going to cover some of the things that I really enjoyed about this movie or that stuck out. So firstly, the best comedic relief in the movie, in my opinion, was David, the CEO. He had multiple funny one-liners, and one of my favorite parts is when they finally prove that M3GAN is worth a damn to bring to market, and he's asking how much does it cost. He's like, more or less than a Tesla. Gemma said that it depends on the model, but then later in the movie they said how M3GAN costs 10 grand. I wish I could buy a Tesla for 10 grand. Watching M3GAN handle that, kind of piece of shit kid Brandon was oddly satisfying, but what I thought was really funny was when she's talking to Katie about Brandon in heaven, and she's like, Brandon's nowhere. And if heaven is real, it's not for kids like Brandon. And that is just so brutal. Oh man, the cold nature of AI. This was interesting. Never seen anyone get killed by a pressure washer, I'm pretty sure. So that was cool. That would hurt so freaking bad. Later in the film, when M3GAN murders David, I love the idea that an AI would know, having access to all of the internet and everything that's been written and put out into the world, how to perfectly frame someone for murder. Because basically they would become true crime experts, more so than my wife or any of the women out there. Towards the end of the film, when M3GAN is playing the piano, I was like, oh my God, this tune sounds so familiar. And then I realized it's Toy Soldiers. And I was like, that's perfect. That was a nice little addition. But you know, if they had more stuff like that throughout that I could really dig into, that would be awesome. But unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of stuff like that. M3GAN also makes a pretty good logical argument when she says, humans kill every day to make their life more bearable. Why can't I? She's kind of got a point. When M3GAN and Gemma are fighting at the end and she rips out a piece of M3GAN's hair, I wrote that she looks like Filch from Harry Potter. If Filch had a daughter that was blessed with his hairline and all that, she looked like Filch. And I'm not really a fan of the way that they had M3GAN go out, because your first generation robot that you made in college, yeah, sure, it's bigger than M3GAN, but one, shouldn't really be able to beat M3GAN. Two, why is Katie piloting this thing like a freaking pro? I mean, just because you watched your aunt power it on and move it around doesn't mean you know how to do it all. I think it would have been better if they somehow used the fact that she is trying to keep Katie safe as a distraction to then put the screwdriver into her head. But I did like the fact that M3GAN wasn't actually officially gone after all that, and that she was showing up in the form of their Alexa, or I think they called it Elsa. And finally, the joke moral of the story is that nothing good happens in Seattle. Like seriously, if you look at, you know, the amount of serial killers, the ones that make like major headlines like Ted Bundy, Green River Killer, that's all Washington. I'm originally from Washington, and just not a lot of great memories there. And I just feel like nothing good happens in Washington. And that's all I have for you guys today on the movie M3GAN. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Psychocinematic. If you did, leave me a thumbs up, comment what you thought down below, and then don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.